The Neuralink translator at Elliot Parker's temple hummed with quiet efficiency as he stepped through the undulating membrane that served as the entrance to the Zendari vessel. His stomach lurched as the gravity shifted subtly. Not unpleasant, just different enough to remind him he was no longer in human space. "Remember, Dr. Parker," Commander Walsh had said during his final briefing, "you're not just a linguist there, you're humanity's eyes and ears. The Zendari communication patterns are unlike anything we've encountered." The corridor ahead pulsed with soft bioluminescence, organic walls seeming to breathe with gentle rhythm. Elliot's linguistic training had prepared him for the ship's architecture, a living organism, cultivated rather than constructed, but experiencing it firsthand was entirely different from the simulations. "Human Parker Elliot," the musical voice came from behind him. He turned and immediately forgot his carefully rehearsed greeting. Standing before him was a Zendari female nearly 7 feet tall, her pearlescent skin shifting with patterns of teal and violet light that flowed like liquid constellations across her elongated frame. 3 pairs of multifaceted eyes, arranged vertically along what approximated a face, regarded him with unmistakable curiosity. "I am Nea Vex Lumina, assigned as your cultural liaison." Her translator rendered her clicks and trills into perfect English, though the device couldn't fully capture the harmonics that vibrated pleasantly in his chest. "You appear disoriented." Elliot cleared his throat. "Just adjusting to your ship's internal environment, it's beautiful." He extended his hand, then remembered the briefing on Zendari customs and awkwardly withdrew it. "Forgive me. I mean to say, I acknowledge your presence with respect." The patterns across Nea's abdomen shifted suddenly, forming geometric shapes that his translator identified as amusement. "Your attempt at our formal greeting is appreciated, though unnecessary. We have studied human customs extensively. This," she extended her slender 6-fingered hand, "is acceptable." As they shook hands, Elliot noticed intricate markings across her lower torso pulsing with increasing intensity. Fascinated by the linguistic implications, he found himself staring at the patterns, mentally cataloging the shifting symbols for later analysis. "Are all human linguists so attentive to personal communication markers?" Nea asked, her harmonics carrying a note he couldn't quite interpret. Heat flooded Elliot's face as he realized where his gaze had settled. I apologize. I was observing the pattern shifts for research purposes." The corridor seemed suddenly warmer as several nearby Zendari paused their activities, their own skin patterns rippling in what his translator identified as collective interest. "Those particular markings," Nea explained with a melodic lilt that his translator struggled to convey, "are what you might call attraction indicators. In your cultural context, you were staring at what would approximate intimate areas." Elliot's face burned hotter. "I had no idea, the cultural briefing didn't." To his surprise, Nea's skin flickered with patterns his translator labeled as genuine amusement, rather than offense. "Perhaps there are aspects of communication best learned through practical observation," she said, her upper eyes narrowing in what he would later learn was the Zendari equivalent of a smile. "Your embarrassment patterns are fascinating as well, human Parker Elliot. Your facial blood vessels display information quite involuntarily." Something in her tone made Elliot relax slightly. "Please, just Elliot is fine." "Very well, just Elliot," she replied, the markers on her skin pulsing in a rhythm his translator couldn't interpret but somehow made him smile. "Shall we begin your orientation? There is much to learn on both sides, it seems." The Luminara's linguistics lab hummed with quiet energy as Elliot adjusted the holographic interface. 3 weeks into his assignment, and the novelty of living aboard a semi-sentient organism had yet to wear off. The walls pulsed with subtle bioluminescence, responding to the ship's circadian rhythm as the artificial night cycle approached. "I believe you're overthinking this particular vocalization," Nea said, her slender fingers manipulating the 3-dimensional sound patterns floating between them. The markings along her forearms flickered with gentle purple. Patience, Elliot had learned. "The subharmonic carries emotional context," he argued, "but I can't seem to map it consistently to your visual markers." Nea tilted her head, all 6 eyes blinking in sequence, an expression he now recognized as contemplative amusement. "Perhaps because you're applying linear translation principles to a nonlinear communication system." "Old habits," Elliot admitted, He stretched, feeling the fatigue of their 4-hour session. On Earth, most languages follow predictable patterns, whereas Zendari communication evolved from collective experiences, Naya explained, her skin rippling with educational patterns. Our ancestors shared neural connections with our world's flora. Words and images became intertwined. Their late-night sessions had become a comfortable routine. After the formal work concluded, they often lingered, sharing stories of their worlds. Elliot had described Earth's oceans, which fascinated Naya, while she spoke of Zendar's floating forest cities with such vivid detail that he could almost see them. Try this, she suggested, adjusting his neural link. Don't translate, feel. As she activated a complex series of vocalizations, Elliot closed his eyes. The sounds bypassed linguistic centers, triggering something deeper, emotional resonance rather than intellectual understanding. That's longing, he said suddenly. Homesickness, but with anticipation. Naya's skin brightened considerably. Yes, in your language, perhaps hopeful nostalgia. It's the feeling of returning home after long absence. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Elliot cleared his throat, suddenly aware of how close they drifted toward each other. I should program these new parameters, he said, turning to his console. His fingers fumbled across the controls, accidentally activating a sequence he hadn't fully decoded. The room filled with pulsing light patterns as his translation device projected what appeared to be intensely personal Zendari symbols. Naya's skin immediately flushed deep indigo, a color he hadn't seen before. I'm so sorry, he stammered, frantically trying to shut down the projection. What did I just do? 3 Zendari passing outside the lab stopped abruptly, their skin markings flashing in synchronous patterns of surprise and interest. One made a trilling sound that his translator awkwardly rendered as congratulatory acknowledgement of courtship intention. You've just broadcast a rather intimate declaration, Naya explained, her voice carrying harmonics that made his translator glitch. Specifically, traditional third-phase courtship symbols requesting exclusive companionship evaluation. Elliot's face burned. Can you explain to them it was a mistake, a translation error? Her markings shifted to a gentle azure. Is that what you wish me to tell them? The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken implications. For a moment, Elliot considered the absurdity of their situation. A human linguist accidentally proposing to an alien woman he couldn't deny finding increasingly fascinating. I'd never intentionally overstep cultural boundaries, he said carefully. But I'd be lying if I said I haven't enjoyed our time together beyond professional interest. Naya's markings shifted to a pattern he hadn't seen before, subtle gold spirals intertwined with her usual blue. Cultural misunderstandings can sometimes reveal unexpected truths, she said softly. Perhaps tomorrow we should discuss proper translation protocols for personal communication. As she left the lab, the markings on her lower back pulsed with rhythms his translator couldn't decipher. But somehow, Elliot understood perfectly. Close your eyes, Naya instructed as they approached the inner sanctum of the Luminara. First impressions of the confluence chamber are best experienced without visual preparation. Elliot complied, allowing her to guide him forward. The air grew noticeably more humid, carrying scents of something like cinnamon and ozone. Beneath his feet, the living floor seemed to pulse with stronger rhythm. Now, she whispered near his ear, look. He opened his eyes and gasped. They stood in an enormous spherical chamber, its walls entirely composed of bioluminescent tissue that undulated with patterns of light choreographed like a living symphony. Dozens of Zendari moved throughout the space, their skin harmonizing with the chamber walls. This is incredible, Elliot breathed. What is this place? The heart of our vessel, Naya explained. Where we commune with the Luminara and each other, tonight is our resonance gathering. In the center, a crystalline pool glowed with shifting colors. Zendari approached it in pairs and small groups, dipping their hands into the liquid. With each touch, new light patterns rippled across the chamber walls. You've been studying our language through isolated patterns, Naya said. Tonight, you'll experience how we communicate collectively. She led him toward a small group of Zendari, who greeted him with synchronous light patterns his translator rendered as welcome curiosity respect. He'd learned enough to respond with a basic hand gesture that made their skin brighten appreciatively. As the gathering progressed, Elliot found himself drawn deeper into the experience. The Zendari didn't just communicate. They created shared emotional landscapes through coordinated light and sound. His linguistic training had never prepared him for language as immersive art. "You're invited to participate," Nea said, indicating the central pool. "But I don't have your bioluminescent abilities," Elliot replied, suddenly self-conscious. Her skin rippled with gentle amusement. "The pool responds to emotional electrical impulses, not species-specific traits. It will translate your feelings into our visual language." Hesitantly, he approached the pool with Nea. As they knelt together at its edge, she placed her six-fingered hand palm up. "Place your hand in mine first," she instructed. "Then we'll touch the surface together." When their hands connected, unexpected warmth spread up his arm. Her skin markings accelerated, creating patterns that seemed to leap between their bodies. "What you're feeling," she explained softly, "is our neural resonance. Your translator can't process this form of communication." Together, they lowered their hands into the luminescent liquid. Immediately, the chamber around them erupted in colors Elliot had never seen before, impossible hues that seemed to exist between Earth's color spectrum. The gathered Zendari responded with collective murmurs of appreciation and surprise. Nea's eyes, all six, widened. "What's happening?" he whispered. "You're projecting emotion patterns our kind rarely displays to outsiders," she answered, her voice carrying unusual harmonics. "Genuine fascination untainted by fear or judgment, and something else." The patterns between them intensified, forming intricate spirals that spread throughout the chamber. Elliot felt a strange connection, as though his consciousness extended beyond his body, brushing against Nea's thoughts. In that moment of connection, he glimpsed fragments of her life, childhood memories of Zendar's twin moons reflecting on crystal forests, the loneliness of being selected for interspecies contact, her quiet observations of him when he wasn't looking. When they finally withdrew their hands, the chamber fell silent. The other Zendari regarded them with new patterns Elliot couldn't interpret. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked quietly. Nea's skin glowed with warm amber light. "No, you did something unprecedented. You shared true empathic resonance, something we believed humans incapable of." As they left the chamber later that night, the way she walked closer to him than protocol dictated told Elliot that something fundamental had changed between them, a boundary crossed that neither had anticipated. The human delegate's interactions with liaison Nea Vex Lumina have exceeded acceptable parameters for cultural exchange. The accusation hung in the air of the Luminara's diplomatic chamber. Senior Ambassador Thexorion Voss's skin displayed formal censure patterns as he addressed the assembled representatives from both species. His statement had been translated into sterile English, but Elliot could see the untranslated markings conveying deeper disapproval. Captain Rivera, humanity's lead diplomat, maintained a carefully neutral expression. "Dr. Parker's mandate includes deep cultural immersion. His participation in your ceremonies falls within our established protocols." Elliot sat rigidly beside Nea, hyper-aware of the mere inches separating them. 3 days had passed since the Confluence Chamber incident, and rumors had spread throughout both human and Zendari contingents. What had been a private connection now faced public scrutiny. "The neural resonance they established poses biological concerns," Thex continued, his upper eyes narrowing. "Human neurochemistry was not anticipated to be compatible with our collective communication methods." Dr. Khatri, the mission's xenobiologist, leaned forward. "Actually, that compatibility is precisely why further study would benefit both species. Dr. Parker's experience suggests possibilities for deeper communication frameworks." Elliot glanced at Nea, whose skin displayed subtle patterns of discomfort visible only to him after weeks of close observation. Beneath the conference table, her hand moved slightly closer to his, not touching but present. "There are considerations beyond scientific curiosity," interjected a human diplomatic officer Elliot recognized as Hartford, one of the more conservative voices on the mission. "Intimate cross-species relationships weren't part of the exchange mandate. They create complications." The word intimate sent murmurs through both delegations. Elliot felt heat rising to his face. "Our connection is professional and cultural," he stated firmly. Any resonance experienced was in pursuit of linguistic understanding. Nea's skin flickered briefly with what he now recognized as the equivalent of suppressed amusement at his diplomatic phrasing. Nevertheless, Captain Rivera said, perhaps some temporary distance would be prudent while we establish clearer guidelines. The suggestion felt like a physical blow. Elliot opened his mouth to protest when alarms suddenly blared throughout the chamber. The Luminara itself shuddered, living walls pulsing with warning patterns. Systemic disruption in the vessel's neural pathways, reported a Zendari technician, skin flashing urgent diagnostic markers. Critical systems failing in multiple sectors. The diplomatic tension instantly dissolved as both delegations mobilized. As they rushed from the chamber, Nea pulled Elliot aside. "This is beyond coincidence," she whispered. "The Luminara began displaying systemic irregularities immediately after our resonance experience." "You think our connection somehow affected the ship?" Elliot asked incredulously. "The Luminara is a living entity with its own form of consciousness," she explained quickly. "It responds to Zendari emotional patterns. Your human neurological signature, channeled through our bond, may have introduced unexpected variables." Before he could respond, a section of wall nearby bulged inward alarmingly. Nea pushed him back just as it ruptured, releasing a pulse of bioluminescent fluid. "We need to reach the neural core," she said urgently. "If I'm right, the ship is trying to communicate with you through me, but doesn't know how." As they navigated the increasingly unstable corridors, Elliot faced the reality of their situation. Whatever was developing between them, professional curiosity, friendship, or something deeper, now extended beyond personal consequences. Their unlikely connection had implications neither species had anticipated. "Even if we resolve this crisis," he said as they rushed toward the core, "they'll never allow us to continue working together." Nea's skin flashed with determination patterns. "Then we must demonstrate that our connection isn't just permissible, it's necessary." The intensity in her multifaceted eyes told Elliot that they were past the point of mere cultural exchange. Whatever barriers existed between their biologies, something more powerful had already bridged the gap. The neural core of the Luminara pulsed with chaotic energy. What should have been orderly bioluminescent patterns now flashed in jagged, discordant sequences. 6 Zendari technicians worked desperately at organic interfaces, their skin displaying emergency response patterns. "The ship's consciousness is in neural shock," explained Chief Engineer Zirel as Elliot and Nea entered. "It's rejecting standard communication protocols." Nea approached the central column, a massive, pulsing pillar of translucent tissue threaded with countless neural fibers. "Has this happened before?" "Never in recorded history," Zirel replied grimly. "The Luminara has encountered many species but never reacted this way." Elliot studied the erratic patterns, recognizing similarities to the displays he'd witnessed in the confluence chamber. "It's not rejecting communication," he said suddenly. "It's trying to establish a new protocol." The realization struck him with clarity. The ship witnessed our resonance and is attempting to replicate it on a larger scale. Captain Rivera and Ambassador Thex arrived with their respective teams, including Dr. Khatri, who immediately began scanning the core with human instruments. "The ship's neural activity matches patterns recorded during your incident," she confirmed, glancing between Elliot and Nea. "It's essentially having an immune response to new information it can't process." "Then we need to teach it how to integrate these patterns," Nea said, her markings shifting to determination mode. Elliot nodded. "Not translation between our languages, but creation of an entirely new communication framework." What followed was a desperate race against time as the ship's systems continued deteriorating. Elliot and Nea positioned themselves on opposite sides of the core, establishing a circuit of communication. Using everything they'd learned from each other, they began synthesizing a hybrid language, human linguistic structures carried through Zendari emotional harmonics. "It's responding," Zirel announced as the chaotic patterns gradually stabilized. "The neural shock is subsiding." Hours passed in intense concentration. Elliot's Neuralink translator burned hot against his temple as it processed unprecedented data flows. Nea's skin glowed with exertion, displaying patterns so complex that even the most accomplished linguists among her people watched in amazement. When the crisis finally passed, the Luminara's core settled into a new steady rhythm, noticeably different from its previous patterns, but stable and harmonious. In the aftermath, neither delegation could deny what had happened. The hybrid communication protocol Elliot and Nea had established had not only saved the ship, but opened new possibilities for interspecies understanding. It appears, Ambassador Thex acknowledged reluctantly, his skin displaying formal recognition patterns, that we must reevaluate our position on certain collaborative methodologies. Captain Rivera nodded. This incident demonstrates that deeper cultural integration may be not just beneficial, but necessary for true communication. Later, alone in the observation dome that crowned the Luminara's uppermost section, Elliot and Nea watched the stars. The ship traveled through space with renewed vigor, its living systems now operating with unprecedented efficiency. "They're calling it the Parker-Vex Protocol," Elliot said, still processing the implications. "Apparently, it's being implemented in 3 other Zendari vessels." Nea's skin displayed the warm amber patterns he'd come to associate with their private moments. "Names are significant in both our cultures. Joining ours together creates something new." The unspoken parallel hung between them. "The biological differences between us," Elliot began, "are considerable," she finished, her markings shifting to a contemplative pattern. "But perhaps that's precisely why this works, not despite our differences, but because of them." She extended her 6-fingered hand, skin illuminating with the intimate communication patterns he'd accidentally broadcast weeks earlier. This time, there was nothing accidental about it. "We've created a new language together," she said. "Perhaps we can also create a new definition of connection." As Elliot took her hand, the observation dome around them responded, its bioluminescence shifting to mirror their combined emotional signature. The Luminara itself seemed to approve as the patterns spread throughout its living structure. Among the stars, a human and a Zendari began the complex, beautiful work of writing a new language, one that bridged worlds through understanding that transcended traditional translation.